Sorry, this is just. Okay, I'm hoping it's worked this time. And you can actually see the presentation. And the
Yes.
meeting is
Yeah, we can see it, Priyanka.
recording.
Yeah.
I hope the meeting is still recording because I can't actually see if it's recording.
It does say recording on my screen.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for joining today. And as I said, I'm really sorry I couldn't do the power hour last month. We had an internet outage in our area which lasted for like a month. So we were without broadband for a month. So it was, very difficult for me to do any meetings from home. And I work in London. I live in Oxfordshire. So yeah, it just wasn't gonna be possible for me to do the meeting then. So here we are today. And I thought I'll give you, use this opportunity to tell you a bit about the research we are doing at UCL in London, the PhDs PTEN research that we are doing, but also sort of, because we've had loads of new people join the patient charity. So I'm guessing they are either newly diagnosed patients or people who found out about the charity recently. So I thought I'll give you, a bit of a background about PHTS, PTEN, the PTEN gene, what its normal functions are, and what happens, in PHTS. So I did think I'll start the presentation with some very, basic biology, just as a reminder that, we are all made of trillions of cells, but in each cell you have what we call as the blueprint of all life. And it all boils down to the DNA in your cell. And the DNA has functional units called genes. This is what we hear about, all the information that is stored in our genes. And these genes, they basically carry the information uh, to make all proteins in our cells. And these proteins are the functional units. So you can have proteins which, genes which lead to proteins which, uh, sort of contribute to how a person looks. So for example, your hair color, your eye color, certain things that you inherit from your parents, it's because you inherit the genes from your parents. And they also encode functional proteins such as enzymes, so your digestive enzymes, and proteins such as insulin, which are required for glucose metabolism. So basically, it all starts from DNA, and they make the proteins, which in turn make the cells. Now, when a cell divides, the DNA also divides because the new cell needs to have the same number of DNA. And during this process, the new DNA, it's made as an exact copy of the parent DNA, of the DNA from the cell it's originating from. That's why it's called parent DNA. And it has to be an exact copy. Now, sometimes the enzymes or proteins which are involved in duplicating this DNA, they make mistakes. And the mistake is about, one per every 100,000 letters that they copy. So DNA, it's made of, we say it's made of 4 letters, so A, T, G, and C. They have to duplicate these letters. Every 100,000 letters, they make one mistake. Now, that doesn't probably sound a lot, but if you think about the amount of DNA we have in our cells, so each cell has 6 billion letters. So that would amount to about 120,000 mistakes every time a cell divides. But the cell also has safeguarding mechanisms. So out of this, 99.99% times, the cell corrects the mistake. There are these checkpoints which say, okay, there's a mistake in the DNA, this needs to be corrected immediately. So, that leaves the cells with about 12 mistakes, and these mistakes are called mutations. Now, of these 12 mutations, almost 90% of the mutations happen in what's known as the non-important part of DNA. So this is just filler DNA or junk DNA in between the important, coding or the important genes that we have in our cells. Most of it, the mutations that we have, they are not going to be in the important part of DNA. And of the remaining mutation, which works out to be about 1.2, majority of them are not harmful. So they will not cause any impact, which is harmful to human beings, as in it causes diseases. So the likelihood of a mutation occurring, which causes diseases, is really, really low. But, our cells divide every day, all the time they're dividing. So when you think about how many mutations do you accumulate during your lifetime, it's a lot. And sometimes these mutations give the cells a bit of an advantage. So this schematic here shows what happens in a normal cell. So normal cell makes a perfect copy, gives two perfect cells with perfect copies of DNA. They divide and they, form a healthy tissue, or that's what is called as a healthy cell division. Now, sometimes when during this process, when it's carried out, one of these cells will acquire a mistake. Now that mistake will give cells a certain advantage. It can make the cells bigger, it can make them divide a lot faster. And that is when you see that there's more of the red cells than there should be, because there should only be two red cells at the next stage, but they're growing a lot faster. And eventually they are the ones that take over the body and lead to diseases such as cancer. Now, this, which happens during your lifetime, it's called as an acquired or a somatic mutation. But sometimes, like in PTEN, a child is born with the mutation in every single cell of their body. So now, irrespective of what's happening, every single cell of the body has this mutation. And if this mutation gives a disadvantage, for example, in PHTS, causes a disease like, with the PTEN mutation, you have a disease like PHTS, it affects the entire, it affects all more than one tissue. So it's not just one tissue that is affected. As we know from PHTS, there are loads of different tissues that are affected. So these mutations are called as inherited mutations. Some people call them germline mutations, hereditary mutations. They're just different terms, but that is something that is, present in every single cell of your body. It is something that can be passed on from a parent to their child if the parent has that mutation. It is also something that can happen during embryonic development. So when your egg cells and your sperm cells are found, one of them develops this mutation, because the process of formation of the egg and the sperm itself, requires a lot of cell divisions to happen. So the DNA is copied multiple times. During that process, the mistake happens, and the eventual zygote, or the child that is born from that particular mutation carrying egg or sperm, has the mutation, is born with the mutation, and they are termed as probands. So sometimes we, have questions that, the parents do not have the mutation. How does the child have the mutation? So that this is the mechanism, how the mutations happen during embryonic development. So we talk about PTEN and we know that it's a cancer predisposition syndrome, but the more we learn about cancer, we know that there are many, many other cancers which are with inherited mutations. So you must have heard about the BRCA genes, which is something, can be passed on from a parent to a child. And women with BRCA gene mutations, they tend to have a higher risk of breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Certain genes, such as the BRCA2 gene, can cause an increased risk of prostate cancer. So I think this figure over here just gives you an idea of the different type of cancers that can be caused due to these inherited mutation. So there are different types of genes that are involved in cancer. You must have heard some of these terms before, but we classify them into four main categories. So you've got oncogenes. Now, these are genes which encourage the cell to multiply. So if you have too much oncogenes, you have too much multiplication of the cell. So these genes are not good for the cell. So usually in diseases such as cancer, there will be an increase in oncogene activity. Or you have tumor suppressor genes such as PTEN. Now, normal function of PTEN or other tumor suppressor genes is they tell the cell you need to stop multiplying. If you lose PTEN function, like in PHTS, the cells multiply, uncontrollably, and that's what causes some of the overgrowths we see, some of the tumors and the cancers that we see in these in PTEN patients. You've got DNA repair genes, which also encourage the cell to, sorry, that's error over here. These genes basically, when you have the mistake during the replication, as I showed you earlier, these are the genes that repair that mistake. So BRCA1 is an example of DNA repair genes. And what BRCA1 basically does is it tells the cell, you made a mistake, you need to correct this error. So if you have BRCA1 mutation, these errors keep accumulating, and then therefore these patients have certain types of cancer, such as breast cancer. And self-destruction genes, sometimes the cell cannot correct the error during DNA replication. So genes such as P53, they basically instruct the cells that, okay, the error has not been corrected. So it's in your best interest that, you die. So the cell then starts an automatic death pathway, and that particular cell with the damage, it will die. So usually what happens in cancer, in all human beings, and no, without, when there's no cancer present, you need a very delicate balance of these different genes. So for example, you need a very delicate balance between oncogenes and tumor suppressors for normal functioning. What happens in cancer, as I said, the bad guys or the oncogenes, they are multiplied and you have too much of their activity. At the same time, tumor suppressors such as PTEN might be inactivated or not present, and that's when diseases such as cancer happen. And this is just a diagram showing the major cancer genes for some of the cancers. So you can see the different organs with the cancers and the different genes associated with it. And you can see that there are loads of different types of genes over here. Some of them are quite frequent. So P53 is one of the most commonly seen genes, mutated in multiple cancers. You see it in lung cancer, breast cancer, and you have it in liver and gut cancer. PTEN is a very small one over here because I think in somatic cancers, PTEN is most commonly associated with glioblastoma or brain cancer. And you've got, some of the other genes present over here as well. So you can see KRAS, which is commonly seen in colon cancer. So these are some of the genes that, researchers have discovered to cause the different cancers. So I'll now talk a little bit about PTEN. So PTEN was actually discovered as a cancer-causing gene in 1997. So during the 90s, when sequencing of, DNA sequencing technology became very common, what doctors did, what clinicians and researchers did was they had these huge, tissue banks of patient biopsies. So, when a patient would come in for surgery, they would take a little biopsy from their tumor sample and they would preserve it. So they said, okay, let's start sequencing all these tumor samples. And they found that there was this one particular location on chromosome 10, which was commonly found missing in many, many cancers, and hence the name. So PTEN, the 10 is because it is on chromosome 10. So there are different ways of looking at it. PTEN stands for phosphatase and tensin homolog on chromosome 10. Some people say the 10 is from the tensin. Some people say the 10 is from the chromosome 10. But yeah, that's how the name, that's how it got named. And it's found on chromosome 10. And the normal function of PTEN was then discovered to be that it chews up PIP3, which is a signaling molecule. And this signaling molecule in the cell, it controls cell division and survival. So PIP3 is actually a fatty molecule, which is present in the membrane, cell membrane of all cells. PIP3 is produced by an enzyme called PI3 kinase. Now you can see PI3 kinase or PI3K is in red. It's because it's an oncogene, and too much of PI3K is commonly associated with cancers as well. So this is the enzyme that produces PIP3. Now, PIP3, what it does is it then signals to downstream proteins such as AKT and mTOR. Now, again, these two proteins are commonly seen mutate, overactivated in cancer. That is because they are master regulators of processes such as cell division, growth, and survival. Now, when you have too much PIP3, you will have too much cell division, growth, and survival, and therefore diseases like cancer. What PTEN does is it keeps the amount of PIP3 in a cell under control. So it reduces the amount of PIP3, and the signal that is then sent to AKT and mTOR is also reduced. And therefore, it keeps the cell division, the growth and survival of these cells under check, and therefore acts as a tumor suppressor. So it prevents the tumors from happening. So as I said, a defect in this, if you do not have PTEN, you have uncontrolled cell division, which leads to benign tumors and cancer. Somatic mutations in PTEN are commonly associated with human cancers, and we know that inherited mutations or germline mutations cause PHTS. And this is from a very old publication, but this just shows you the different types of cancers in which PTEN is seen somatically. So these are not the inherited cancer, these are not the PHTS cancers, but you have PTEN mutations in breast cancer, endometrium, thyroid, prostate, leukemias, glioblastomas, melanomas, lung cancer, liver, bladder, kidney, pancreas, adrenal cancer, and colon, and the GI tract. And you can see that some of these are also seen in PHTS patients. So you've got breast cancer in PHTS patients, endometrial cancer, thyroid cancer, and then you've got you know you've got benign polyps in the GI tract. But other than that, there are some other cancers such as prostate cancer, leukemias, and glioblastomas, which are not seen in PHTS, for example. Melanomas are associated with PHTS. I think this publication is probably a bit too old, but melanomas are associated with PHTS now. And as a gene, PTEN doesn't just, it's a tumor suppressor, yes, but PTEN also plays a very important role in the pathway that is required for glucose metabolism. So but it works in a different way. So if you do not have PTEN, you will not get type 2 diabetes. And I thought I'll mention this because I have been asked in the past that do PTEN patients have an increased risk of type 2 diabetes? Functionally, just losing the protein should not cause type 2 diabetes. There might be other cofactors involved, such as lifestyle or mutation of a different gene, or defect in insulin production, but loss of PTEN gene function alone does not cause type 2 diabetes. So I've got a slide here on PHTS. I mean, I do not need to introduce PHTS or PTEN hematoma tumor syndrome to you. Some of you call it just as PTEN, but most scientists, researchers such as myself, we call it as PHTS. We had a really nice talk from Dr. Catherine Lackland earlier in the year during one of our power hours, and she told us how this term came into being. It wasn't called PHTS until very recently. PHTS can have various other syndromes. Those were the classical nomenclature. So you have Cowden's, you have BRRS, and some of the other terms that were used. But now everything is put under an umbrella term called PHTS. And this is basically, if you have a germline PTEN mutation, it basically you get the diagnosis of PHTS. We already know that it's a rare disease. There are studies which say it's 1 in 250,000 people, but we also know that that study is very old and it's probably underestimated. So we need some new, sort of analysis to see what the percentage is. But, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but we've got, 300 patients in UK and Ireland? So that's sort of...
Yes, yeah, I would say, I was just about 300, 350 maybe, but not exactly sure.
Yeah, but we still feel that PHTS is, still very underdiagnosed. So there are likely more patients than, we know of. We know that PHT, it's one of the most common phenotypes that is seen in patients at a young age is this visibly large head, which is called macrocephaly. And then, patients, young children with PHTS can have developmental delay and present with, autism spectrum disorders. They also have multiple skin conditions. So if you might have noticed if you have PHTS or if your child has PHTS, these skin lesions, so they look like little lumps on your skin. These are called as hematomas. And we know that there's an increased risk of certain types of cancers in PHTS patients. So this diagram over here just shows you what the increased risk is. So in black is the risk of the cancers in the general population. So breast cancer, for example, we say 1 in 8 of us is going to get breast cancer in our lifetime. Obviously, this is women only. But in PHTS patient, this risk is increased from 12% to 85% of the patients. You have a significant increase in endometrial cancer as well. So 28% of the PHTS patients have a risk of endometrial cancer as opposed to 2.6%, and thyroid cancer as well. 30, it's increased from 1% to 35% in PHTS patients. We have more and more evidence that PHTS patients can have immune dysfunctions. I've spoken to some of you about, your child with PTEN has recurrent chest infections, or, they do not mount, some PHTS patients, they do not mount a response when they're given a vaccine, so they don't produce antibodies. So we now know that that is something that is associated with PHTS. And vascular anomalies or vascular malformations, it also occurs in about 50% of PHTS patients. So that is also something that we, now say that it is one of the known manifestations of PHTS. So I thought that before I take you through all the work that we do at UCL, I introduce you to the amazing team we've got at UCL. So our lab is called as the Cell Signaling Lab. We are on the UCL main campus. We are opposite the Macmillan Center, if you've ever been there. And this is, just very close to Euston Square. The lab is led by Professor Bart van Hazenbroek. So you've probably seen him at various patient days. That picture over there actually is from one of the, I think it was 2022, the PTEN patient day that happened in Oxford. And that's all of us there. That's Bart there. And, many of you might remember him with his tote bag around his neck, which was quite funny, but he had all his stuff in there and he didn't want to lose the bag. So he just decided to carry it around his neck. But that's the amazing team of researchers we've got at UCL. And this picture here, that was taken in Barcelona last year. And that's Ellie, who is one of our PTEN UKI trustees. Ellie joined us for this meeting to represent PTEN UKI. So that's the different members of the team. We rely on a lot of external collaborators and facilities in our building to do this research. And of course, our work is funded by PTEN Research Foundation. So, many of you must have heard about them and heard them speak at different events. And we are hoping that they are going to do a power hour later in this year to just give you an update on the research activities that they have been funding. So in our lab, we have various themes of research, which all revolve around understanding PHTS and trying to develop therapies for PHTS. So one of the things that we do in the lab is something called as genotype-phenotype correlation. So, sorry, before I go to that, just to say that for majority of our work, we use a mouse model. And this is a mouse model which only expresses one copy of PTEN. So if you know that our chromosomes are in pairs, and each chromosome has one copy of each gene. So all cells normally have two copies of PTEN gene. In PHTS, either one copy is mutated. So you have, you have a spelling mistake in there, or sometimes the entire gene, the entire region of DNA which codes for PTEN is deleted from the cells. So therefore, you do not have any PTEN being expressed from that particular chromosome. So that's what we've used over here. We've taken a mouse, and from one of its chromosome, we deleted a copy of the PTEN gene. So therefore, it's known as a PTEN plus minus mouse. And we use this as a model for PHTS. And you can see that just like, it gets the same sort of tumors as the PHTS patients do. So 100% of our mice get macrocephaly, and they have tumors of the GI tract, of the endometrium, they have mammary tumors, and they have thyroid tumors. And our mice also get lymphoid hyperplasia. So this is the same as the enlarged tonsils or the adenoids that is seen in our young PHTS patients. And this is something that we've realized recently, that so Dr. Lackland, she published recently that the enlarged tonsils, they are actually lymphoid overgrowths. So our mice, almost 97% of our mice get these enlarged lymph nodes, which is similar to enlarged tonsils in the patient. So I think this allows us to study why that happens. And what sort of treatments we can use. So I'll come to that in a minute. But again, coming back to the different topics of research we've got in our lab. So first one is genotype phenotype correlation. So when we meet PHTS patients, you can have two siblings with the same mutation, or you can have a parent and child with the same mutation, but they have very different presentations. Like, we've heard about parents who did not find they actually carried a mutation in the gene until their child was diagnosed with PHTS. Uh, so what is it that causes to such a huge variation seen in phenotypes of patients carrying exactly the same mutation? Is it, environmental factors? Are there genetic factors? So this is something that we are trying to understand. So what we have done is we've made mouse models. So not just us, other research labs as well. We have made mouse models for the different mutations that are found in PHTS. And using those mouse models, we are trying to, we have studied its impact on the various symptoms. And eventually, the idea is that if we have a better understanding of why there's this variation, that'll help us tailor treatments and care according to that. So you might have a PHTS patient who might need screening for certain types of, for some of the tissues a lot earlier in life, and some of them might not need it until much later in life because they have a really low risk for, you know, uh, that particular cancer. So, for example, thyroid screening is something that we talk about. Currently, all PHTS patients are given the same guidelines. The idea is not to take away the screening from any patient, but are there patients who need the screening a bit earlier because they have an even increased risk of a certain type of cancer? So that's where this research is aimed at. The next one is next one of the projects in the lab. It's focused on immune analysis. So again, as I mentioned, that PHTS patients will have increased risk to infections. They have lower antibody production, and we also know that our immune system, depending, like, it contributes to cancer progression. So what we are trying to do in our lab is, what we've done is we've taken this mouse and we've studied its immune system, and we've studied things like vaccine response, and is the immune system actually uh, contributing to slow or faster development of the cancer. Mechanism of tumorigenesis. So what, when a child is born with a mutation in the PTEN gene, the cancers occur a lot later in life. So, of course, there's a difference in when the cancers occur, but it can be anywhere. You might, nothing might happen for 20, 25 years, 30, 40 years of their life. So one of the big questions that we have in the field is that what happens during these years that eventually causes the cancer? It's not something that happens overnight. It is something that happens, it's a cumulative effect. And what is this cumulative effect? Actually, there was this really interesting study from a lab in Cambridge. They showed that before cancer happens, the mutation that causes the cancer can happen up to 20 years before the cancer actually happens. And I think PHTS is a very good example of that is actually true, because, as I said, you can be born with a mutation in this gene, but the cancers happen later on in life. So we are really interested in understanding what are the different events that happen during this time that cause the cancer. Another thing that really interests us is that a lot of the cancers that PHTS patients get, they are hormonally regulated organs, so thyroid, breast, and endometrium, for example. Uh, so it just really puzzles us that why is it that it's the hormonally, regulated tissues that get these cancers. So what we are trying to do is, or what we've done is, for the first part, to understand what are the events that lead to cancer, we take the DNA from the mice before the onset of tumors. So we've looked at endometrial tumors, and we take at different stages of their life, and then we see what might be causing the tumor. And actually, when Professor Mark Tiskovich, he was speaking at the last Power Hour, he spoke about one of the projects where they are trying to do this exact same thing now, but with taking tissue biopsies from PHTS patients. So just to try and understand, is there a common mechanism which leads to these tumors? And what that's going to do is, if we understand that there's actually, along with the PTEN mutation, there's another one, maybe one or two other factors which lead to the tumors, then we might be able to intervene with those factors, or have medication specifically to intervene with those factors, and therefore develop new therapies for PHTS. What we also do is we isolate cells from these mice. So we can isolate endometrial cells and mammary cells, and then we can treat them with hormones and then look at changes, and then try and understand that why is it that PHTS patients get tumors in hormonally sensitive organ. So yeah, these are the some of the research topics that we have in the lab. These are ongoing projects, and yeah, we hope to complete them soon. But one project that's really close to my heart, and I've been working on it, which has taken up, which is mostly the work that I do, is to see if we can repurpose drugs for PHTS therapy. So PTEN, it's a part of this pathway. So I'll put this up again over here. So we lose PTEN, and then what researchers did that was to see that, okay, you've lost PTEN. So what else is remaining over here that you can target? So what you can do is you can target the PI3K enzyme. So if you reduce the function of this enzyme, you have less PIP3 production, or you can reduce the function of the downstream proteins such as AKT and mTOR. And the idea is that if you hit these different nodes with medication that inactivates them, you are basically doing what PTEN would normally do in cells. So it acts as a brake. So you are doing that using medication. And because this pathway is so commonly mutated in cancer, over the last 4 decades, researchers have actually developed a lot of medications to target this particular pathway. So what we are doing with PTEN research is we've contacted pharmaceutical companies, and we would really like to see if your medication, which is being used for breast cancer or prostate cancer, if we can use it, for PHTS patients as well. And again, we use our mouse model, which gets all of these cancers during its lifetime. And then what we do is, once the mouse is about 6 weeks of age, which is similar to about 18 years of age in human years, we take the mice and we start giving it this medication. And the mouse, pretty much, the medication is given for the rest of its life. And then we look at various things as to, do the tumors occur later in life, and does it reduce the grade of the tumors? So we published our first study using rapamycin, or sirolimus, as some of you might know it as. And we showed, using this particular drug, so using rapamycin, that if you use a low dose of rapamycin, similar to the dose that's being given to some other patients with some other genetic conditions, what it does is it does delay the occurrence of those tumors. So in the female mice, we found that there was almost a 50% delay in the development of these tumors. And in the males, it was a lot longer, so 65% delay. So just to give you an example, if our female mice were getting tumors around 1 year of age, are the ones that were not on the drug, the ones that did get the tumor, on rapamycin, the tumors started occurring around 1.5 years, so around 18 months of age. So there was a 50% improvement in disease-free survival. And then we looked at the different tumors, and we found that with rapamycin treatment, we had a reduced incident of the GI tumors, thyroid tumors, and it significantly reduced the grade of the endometrial tumors. So the endometrial tumors did happen in all the mice, but the grade of the tumor, the severity of the tumor, was much lower in the treated group. And rapamycin treatment is normally known to be associated with side effects. So patients who are on long-term rapamycin can have, GI issues. So they can have, like common chemotherapeutic effects, such as diarrhea and nausea and vomiting. You will not believe this, but our mice can also get diarrhea, and they can get very, very sick if they have these side effects. And we found that it did not have any of these side effects. Another known long-term side effect of rapamycin is type 2 diabetes. So as I said, that if you have a PTEN mutation, your risk for type 2 diabetes is anyways very less. And we found that prolonged treatment of rapamycin did not cause type 2 diabetes in these mice. So using this particular study, structure, we have now tested 5 additional drugs, and we have promising results from 2 of these drugs used, so including rapamycin. That's 3 different drugs that we have promising results from. And we are hoping that we publish the results from these 5 additional drugs as soon as possible. And for one of the drugs, at least, we are hoping that the pharmaceutical company is hoping to start pushing it towards clinical trials. So watch this space. There might be something promising, a promising new drug on the horizon. Okay, so this is all the work that we are already doing in the lab. And if you notice, I've added one additional arm to the schematic. That's because that's the next project that we are starting in the lab. We have applied for funding. We are hoping we get the funding for this, but this is going to be a breast cancer study. So we want to, because 85% of female PHTS patients have an increased risk of breast cancer, it is one of the biggest concerns for these patients, and we would really like to understand the mechanism of breast cancer development in PHTS. Sorry. So just try and understand what happens that leads to breast cancer, and then we'll also test some of these medications or drugs for breast cancer treatment in PHTS. I'm just going to have some water. I thought I will also talk about other research efforts. So I think when PTEN Research, when they give their talk, you will hear all about the projects that they are funding and the research that they are funding. But one of the things that we have recently joined forces with is the mTOR pathway, disease pathway node. So you must have heard about it at some of our meetings. But basically, it's a group of researchers who work on various rare diseases associated with the same pathway. So this figure over here is quite crowded. And you've got PTEN over there, which causes PTEN hematoma tumor syndrome. It's also known as APDS-like. But you can have mutations in all these other members of the same pathway, and it leads to a lot of other genetic conditions. So, you might have heard of things like APDS or PROS. So these are all caused by mutation in other genes. So Joe Bateman from King's College London, he came up with the idea with some of his colleagues that, okay, we have some rare diseases over here, but there's a lot of overlap. So if you look over here, the overlap of the different manifestations. So for example, you have immune issues, which can be seen in APDS and APDS-like, which is PHTS, and then PROS. You can have, renal issues, so renal tumors, which is shared with TSC and PTEN PHTS. You have vascular malformations, which are seen in PHTS and PROS. Neurology so things like developmental delay and autism and epilepsy and seizures, they are seen in a lot of these syndromes over here. Dermatological findings are seen in PHTS, but they're also seen in TS. They're seen in Proteus syndrome, and GI issues, they are again seen in PHTS, and they're seen in some of these other syndromes. So they thought that, why do we not join forces? And instead of saying that we are going to try and do something for PHTS alone, if we bring all of these patients together, or bring our efforts together, then it makes it, then it's not as rare as it is. You have larger groups of patients to look at, which will help set up clinical trials a lot easily, because one of the issues with setting up clinical trials for rare diseases such as PHTS is you never have enough number of patients. So why do we want to separate the efforts? Why don't we join forces? And they have their main objectives are basically to improve treatment, to improve our understanding of the mechanism, and to improve diagnosis. So this is one of the other ongoing research efforts, and we, as a charity, PTEN UK as a charity, we are working with them. Researchers such as myself, we are a part of this, and we are working towards trying to join efforts to improve our understanding of not just PHTS, but all these, related conditions, which we share a lot. There's a lot of commonality. So the idea is, can we, use that to our advantage and improve our understanding of these diseases and to improve treatments available. So I think that's all I've got for now. So yeah, thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can either raise your hand or just ask me questions. Okay, I can't see any questions. Kelly, do you have any questions? Yeah, I've got.
No, I was going to say thank you ever so much, though, Priyanka. That was very, very interesting. Even starting right from the beginning and going through the, the basics, as it were, refreshing our memory and then just going straight through. So yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you. I think we've got a question
From Fiona, I think.
from
Yeah.
Fiona.
What are vascular malformations? So a lot of PHTS patients have AVMs. So they are basically, you have overgrowth of the blood vessels. So they can be either arterial, so overgrowth of the arteries, or overgrowth of the veins. And they lead to these painful sort of, painful overgrowths, which are called vascular malformations. I hope that answers your question. But it's caused due to overgrowth of the arteries and veins, so basically the blood vessels.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were you talking about the immune side of things?
Yes.
I think I understood what you were talking about. Is it for all PTEN patients, or will it only be in children? It's probably a really stupid question. Maybe I didn't understand.
No, it's not a stupid question at all. It is something that is seen in young patients. So you will have children who have an increased risk of infections. They have recurrent chest infections. We've had, I've had parents speak to me before about this, that, their child keeps getting a chest infection pretty much back to back, and none of the antibiotics are working. Sometimes when you take a vaccine, you might not mount an immune response, and some of the patients, for them, it's so severe that they have to undergo immunoglobulin replacement therapy. So we are hoping that Dr. Anita Chandra, who is an immunologist, she has agreed to do a power hour, and she will talk more about this. But it is quite common, in PHTS patients. I have to say that up until a few years ago, it wasn't something that was associated with PHTS. There have been a few studies, especially from a group from Netherlands. They have done some of these sort of, analysis where they've shown that actually it's commonly associated. And then we have done now detailed analysis of our mouse model, and we can show that actually, yes, that, this is something that is seen in our mouse model as well. But we are still, not 100% sure about what the mechanism is, why does it happen. And I think the thing that I was telling you about genotype phenotype correlation, or the variation that is seen in phenotypes, any one so you have some phenotypes which are very common, such as the macrocephaly, or maybe developmental delay, certain types of cancers, but none of the phenotypes are seen in every single patient. And that's not just with PHTS, that's with any rare disease. You have such heterogeneity or such different presentation amongst different patients. Sometimes you just go, no, it's a child, they probably just have another chest infection, they're just unwell, but it is due to the mutation in the PTEN gene that they are carrying, that they have this increased risk of chest infection, and their immune system isn't strong enough to fight those infections.
Right, okay. So I was just being for me. It pricked my ears up for myself, in that I'm that person that constantly picks up stuff. So I was like,
okay. No,
yeah.
it is possible. And actually, this is something Dr. Anita Chandra said, that if you are somebody who, like, if you have PTEN and if you get these recurrent infections, ask to be seen by an immunologist, get a referral for an immunologist, ask them to do. So again, when she speaks, she'll be able to tell you a bit more about, what are the things that you can ask your immunologist to do, what sort of tests and stuff. But
Right.
this is something, and she actually sees PHTS patients. So she's at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, and that's where her interest stems from. So she published a paper, and she saw loads of Cowden patients who had recurrent infections and low immunoglobulin levels. So yeah, it is associated with PTEN. Now we understand that. Okay, got another question.
Thank you.
Okay, how do we get access? I'm guessing is that question from Becky to these PTEN related research studies. So if you go to, if you, Becky, you've got my email. If you tell me what sort of studies you're interested in, I could send you some of the research papers. Maybe we've talked about this, Kelly, haven't we, to put some of these on our website. It's just that sometimes these papers are very technical and we do not want to just put everything that's out there. So if you, which makes it quite difficult for us to decide what should go on the website, what shouldn't go on the website, because as I said, some of these are very, uh, very technical, and they, you can read an entire paper and probably sometimes I read these papers and I just go, didn't understand majority of what was in there. But if you write to me about what are the topics that you are interested in, maybe I can send you some of these papers, and if you then have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions. And this is for everybody. Like I can put my email ID in the chat. I'm sure my email ID is probably available through the website, or you can, if you have Kelly's email, you can just email her and she can forward me the request. That is if you don't have my email. But I'm always happy to, send relevant research articles. And, if you have any questions about those research articles, I'll be happy to take you through them.
Priyanka, we do have a couple of research papers on our website now.
Yeah.
In useful information links. We've got.
I've seen those. I think they
There's
are more
two
about,
of them.
I think they are more about like, the big census studies and stuff, which tell you what is the prevalence of the different types of cancers and stuff, or maybe some of the clinical trials. But some of the studies about what's happening to the immune system and stuff, they are very technical. They'll tell you about the different populations of the immune cells. And when I wasn't an immunologist and I was a PTEN biochemist, I would read those papers and just go, I do not understand anything. So that's one of the reasons why, we haven't put all of that information on the website, but I'll be happy to, send you some information. Okay, there's a question which says vascular malformations are seen less commonly in pediatric patients. Do you agree that is actually correct? Because in our Turkish PTEN pediatric registry, there are 36 patients and only one with vascular. No, that is absolutely correct. And I think it's also because it's just like any overgrowth. It takes time to develop. So these vascular malformations, you do have very rare, cases in which you'll have a pediatric patient with vascular malformations, but they are most commonly seen in adults, in the 50%, number that I put in my slide saying, it's seen in about 50% of the patients. That is from an adult population. Okay. There are no more questions in the chat. Yes, you can ask a question. Yeah.
Just my son has been diagnosed last year. He already had thyroid cancer stage 3.
Okay.
And he has hemihypertrophy, or her left side is larger than the right. And he developed a few tumors just on the left side. He already had juvenile polyps in the colon.
Yeah.
Also, he got autism spectrum disorder, cognitive disabilities, and motility as well because of the discrepancy on his legs.
Yeah.
The question now is, because I'm very concerned, he's losing the hearing on the left side.
Yeah.
So already the left, he cannot hear properly on the left ear.
Yeah.
He already lost the 50%.
Yeah.
And he's having issues on the right now, and he's developing a lot of earwax.
Okay.
So it's because I couldn't find any kind of information about that. If any is there any link in that problem with this, with the PTEN?
So hearing loss or issues with the ears are not commonly associated with PTEN. But again, I cannot say for sure because, as I said, up until a decade ago, we didn't believe that the immune issues were related to PTEN. The more we study, the more we get patient information, and I think this is one of the reasons why having a patient registry is very important, because things that are normally missed, because you would probably just go, okay, he's getting a lot of earwax, it's probably one of your not your major concerns. When you have other issues, when your child has cancer, and your doctor might be more concerned about the other things, and those things get missed. But if during in a patient registry, we are just hoping that we can capture these little bits of information, and then understand this. So coming back to your question, there is no currently, it's not known to be linked to PTEN. But PTEN has an impact on the brain, so it is possible that it's causing something to the auditory nerve. I don't know, has he had a brain scan to check that? Do you live in the UK?
Yes, we
You
are.
do.
And believe me, I knew it was something wrong with him since he was a baby,
Okay.
but it was very difficult for me to get a diagnosis. And he was diagnosed with autism, and just last year when I finally pushed, because it was, for me, it was very rare. He developing tumors, benign tumors in the left-hand side.
Yeah. So that's another thing. If you say that there's just, his left-hand side, he's got hypertrophy, that is not something that's commonly seen with PTEN. And you say that he also has juvenile polyposis, which is not something. So colon polyps are seen with PTEN, but if you have juvenile polyposis, that's usually because you have a mutation in PTEN, but there's also another gene which is mutated.
Okay.
So I think it's called BMPR1, but I'll just need to check
I haven't been told about that. No, because the doctor thought he had a rectal prolapse. So
Yeah.
when he went for surgery, the surgeon came back to me and said, no, there were some polyps, colon polyps.
Okay, yeah. So it might be in which part of the UK are you in?
In West Sussex.
West Sussex, okay.
We went to Southampton
Mhm.
and in London, the
Okay.
college, university, UCL.
Okay. I'm just thinking if maybe you might want to be seen by Professor Home Uleg at Oxford, because he sees PHTS patients with juvenile polyposis. So if you can, you know what, I'm just going to put my email address in the
Yes,
chat.
please, because I'm new here. I'm just, as I said, it's just been a year since he was diagnosed, and as soon he was diagnosed, we had a scan, and he already had cancer, stage 3, metastasis. And
So Holmes quite interested in colon polypus, juvenile polyps, and he also sees patients with thyroid issues. So if you send me an email, I might be able to direct you to him. I cannot promise anything because of the NHS and everything, but I'll definitely try and get you. I'll definitely put you in touch with him.
yeah, because there's too many functions on him that I can see he's deteriorating, and no one can answer anything. The audiology said, I don't know, it just is a normal earwax, and
Yeah.
he's losing his hearing, but that's it.
Yeah. No, it's true. We can have you when you said you went to Southampton, did you meet Dr. Catherine Lackland?
I cannot remember because there's been a lot of going on. There's too many doctors, surgeons, oncologists.
No, that's what happens, and I think that's why we are trying now to,
Direct. That's
ideal.
what I need.
Yeah, it would be great to have a P10 clinic, but where you can get referred and you can be triaged to the correct specialist. But that's something that P10 UKI and P10 research, they are everybody's trying to put in the work for that, and it's just something that's gonna
We're working on that, Priyanka. We're working
Yeah,
on
I
it.
know, I know. And I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy. Like every
Yeah.
time I speak to Catherine, and it's you know, when I see certain other charities, so I've been meeting people from TSA, which is Tuberous Sclerosis Association, and they have a TS clinic in London, one in Cardiff. So they have a few TS clinics around the country. And when I see that, I'm a bit hopeful that we'll get there one day, and we're going to find, the a PTEN clinic's going to be a reality. By we are working towards it, and I know a lot of work is being put in by you and Catherine and some others. So yeah, we can hope. Let's hope that happens.
All comes down to funding, doesn't
it? It does, and given the state, things.
I didn't even know there was a charities either. So I
They,
don't.
they are
I
for
don't
other rare diseases. So TSA is for tuberous sclerosis, which is another rare disease in the same pathway. So again, it's, there is an estimate of 4,000 to 11,000 patients in the UK. So we always have the chat about, rare versus extremely rare. And I think PTEN comes under the category of extremely rare compared to something like TS, which is considered rare. Also, there's that. But yeah, PTEN UKI, obviously, our patient charity is trying to, do a lot of work. And then you've got PTEN Research Foundation, which is the research charity, which funds research and it funds clinical trials and other stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, I've put my email in the chat. So if at any stage you have a question, feel free to drop me an email. You can, reach out to me whenever you like. Usually, if I'm able to help, I will answer your email. Otherwise, I'll forward your email to Kelly or somebody else who I think might be in a better position to help. So, sometimes I just forward your email on the go. I might not reply back, but that's just, me sending you to the correct person. But yeah, feel free to send me an email if you have any more questions. And again, thank you very much. I do not think we have a power hour scheduled for August because it's school holidays. So I think the next one's going to be in September. And everybody have a lovely summer. And
Thanks,
see you in
Priyanka. It was
September.
really useful, really, yeah, really helpful. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank
Yeah.
thanks everybody.
We'll
for
publish what we're going to be talking about in September.
Yes,
Won't
yeah.
we? We'll have to think. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
I'll
Have a
see
good
you all.
one. Bye.
Bye. Bye.